The phone rang sharply next to the sleeping Terry Gilson. He woke up abruptly. "Oh, what is it?" he growled. The phone rang again. He picked up the receiver. "Hello?" he muttered, coughing earnestly. "Mr. Gilson?" "Yes?" "This is Sergeant Preston of the Yukon County Police Department. May I speak to Mrs. Turvey?" growled an authoritative voice in Gilson's ear. "Who is this?" "Mr. Gilson, please put me through to Mrs. Turvey. This is a police emergency." Again, the clear and demanding tone. "Just a moment," Gilson muttered. He handed the receiver to the naked woman lying beside him. "For you. It's the police," he said simply. "What?" She snatched the receiver from his hands. "Hello." "Good morning, my dear unfaithful wife," came the all-too-cheerful greeting. "I hope you slept well last night when you and your lover finished having fun." "Oh my God, Mick. Mick, is that you?" "You can rest assured, darling. I called to give you some information you'll need." "Mick, Mick, please," she tried. "First of all, you can throw away your house key. It doesn't work anymore. Besides, I changed the code on the garage door opener." "Mick, please. It's not what you think," she cried. "You don't know what I think, Sheila. But I didn't call to discuss it with you. I called to tell you that your credit cards will no longer be valid, and you can pick up your clothes and toiletries in the plastic tubs behind the side gate anytime you want." The voice became as cold as ice. "No, no, Mick, please. Don't do this, please," my wife pleaded desperately. "It's too late, sweethearts. I've already done it." "But where am I supposed to go?" she exclaimed. "Well, in the immortal words of Rhett Butler, frankly, my dear, I don't care." The tube slammed angrily shut. I'd started this process weeks ago, but this particular morning was the decisive moment. If I hadn't been so sure she was asleep in Gilson's room, I wouldn't have even tried the trick. I was surprised at how easy it had been and how empty the moment had seemed. A cuckold's victory, I thought. Too little and too late. I suppose that's pretty apt to describe my situation. My name is Michael Mick Turvey. I am 43 years old, and I work as a sales representative for a building materials company. I have been with this company for over 20 years. Almost exactly 20 years ago, I married Sheila Pratt. We were to celebrate our 20th anniversary next month. I considered our marriage a success, for we had two wonderful children. Our first, Angela, my angel, was born a year and a half after we were married, and Ben, our son, was born 2 years later. I loved my wife and children with all my soul. They were the meaning of my existence. No man could be prouder of his family than I was. We lived in a modest home, but it had everything a family could want. The three-bedroom split level was our second home, purchased 4 years ago. It wasn't new, but we made an effort to update it and make it our own. A new kitchen, then a finished basement with a workshop for me, and a large family room that the kids could use for their entertainment. A garage where we actually parked our cars, and then new furniture for the living room and dining room. I felt like we had the perfect life. I met Sheila when we were both in 11th grade. She was a pretty blonde with a nice body, so it wasn't hard to notice her. She tried out for the cheerleading squad, but was unsuccessful. I played a receiver on the soccer team and thought we might make a good couple. I asked her out right after school started in the fall, and she said yes. We dated for several months, and during that time, Sheila developed into a very beautiful girl. I wasn't the only one who noticed. I thought we were dating, but there was no way Sheila could confirm it. The next thing I knew, our quarterback Terry Gilson asked her out, and she said yes. I couldn't understand it. I thought we were a couple, but apparently I was wrong. Gilson was the star of our team. He was a big, talented high school senior with a strong arm and a will to win that I had never encountered before. As a quarterback, he was a coach's dream and a coach's nightmare. He had tremendous talent and fearlessness, but he just couldn't follow orders. As the rest of the team realized, Terry was not a team player. Terry was just Terry. Our team finished that season with a winning record, but I wondered how much better we could have been if Terry had stuck to the coach's script instead of making it up as he went along. For all his talent, he was undisciplined and very frustrating for all of us who worked in his shadow. Terry often bragged about entertaining every cheerleader at least once. I was grateful that Sheila wasn't a cheerleader, but I wasn't sure that would protect her. It made no sense to me to be mad at Gilson. He was what he was, a ruthless womanizer. He viewed these young girls as meat on his plate, and he was going to enjoy them. I was hurt that Sheila had fallen for him, but I knew there was nothing I could do about it. Next year, Terry would be gone and Sheila and I would still be here. Maybe I still had a chance. But it didn't happen. I started dating Marilyn Erlacher. Since the seats in our school were most often in alphabetical order, Marilyn sat behind me most of the time and kept me in her sights. Marilyn was a nice girl, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted something more exciting, but she was too much like Ms. Erlacher. We got along fine, and I think she was impressed that a soccer player was interested in her. But that was the end of it. In the spring, I started looking for her replacement. Meanwhile, Gilson had dumped Sheila in favor of some other girl, and she was available again. I thought about it, but given the way she dumped me, I decided to ignore her. By the end of the year, she had found someone else, and I was left out again. In 12th grade, everything changed. Roger Davidson became the quarterback of our team, and he turned out to be everything Terry Gilson wasn't. He was a leader and the best team player. He looked at us to determine who could do what. I thought more than once that this guy could make a coach. He understood what it took to win and to get the most out of what the team had to offer. The result was great. I was catching passes like never before, and we were winning regularly. When Roger was on that court, he was calm, directing the game and making sure everyone knew how to act. It was all new to me, and I loved it. I continued to avoid Sheila, my ego still wounded by my affair with Gilson. I wasn't really surprised when Roger started dating her. For all his talent and leadership, he was a quiet guy, and it was hard not to like him. Oddly enough, that was fine with me. If I couldn't be with her, Roger was my choice. I think she felt the same way. Sheila wasn't the smartest girl in school. In fact, she got average grades and, like many of her classmates, got a job. She never had plans for college. She must have realized her limitations. She took a job as a bank teller at the mall. After graduation, I lost touch with her. I was entering college and already dreaming of playing soccer, drinking beer with the boys, and dating only the prettiest girls who aspired to be with the soccer hero. By Christmas, reality set in. I had failed 3 classes, and while I enjoyed every minute I spent on the soccer field, everything else on campus was not as enjoyable. There was no line of girls waiting to date me. Beer was downtown and expensive for my limited budget. Classes were torture, and it was hard for me to realize that the learning process was solely up to me. There was no one to keep an eye on me and make sure I was attending class or completing assignments. It was a completely different world. The grades posted on the board at the end of the semester were disappointing. I was facing expulsion. Well, I said to myself, next semester, no soccer and no girlfriends, I'll be fine. It wasn't easy. It was a whole new way of life for me. It was a struggle. I got through it, but not by much. With a year of college under my belt, I wondered if this was what I wanted to do for the next 3 years. If I had asked that question, the answer would have been an obvious no. I found a job in an office in the city, and every morning I would get on the bus, work my 9 hours, get on the bus again, and drive home. After a few months, I realized that this couldn't be my future. I needed something more. I lasted almost 2 years, but I was constantly looking for something better. If you asked me what my career would be like when I graduated, I would have no idea. I certainly wouldn't categorize myself as a salesperson. In my mind, a salesperson is someone who goes door to door selling brushes, kitchen utensils, or magazines. That's certainly not me. I got a different perspective when I saw what industrial sales was all about. You had to know your product and show people that it was good, if not better than the one they were using, and then convince them to buy it. More importantly, the technical side was something I could get passionate about. It didn't take me long to realize that sales is a strategy. What do you have that the customer needs? Why would he want to buy it from you? I applied for a transfer to one of the operational branches and was given the opportunity to work in sales, that is, inside the company. That was the beginning, and the more I saw, the more I realized that this was what I wanted to do. I went to work still not having a car and living at home. When I moved into the operations department, nothing had changed. I was a rookie with a small paycheck and took the bus to and from work. When I got my first paycheck, I decided to open a bank account. Up until that point, I had been living from paycheck to paycheck, but now things were about to change. For convenience, I chose a bank near the bus stop and walked in. As I approached the customer service counter, I froze in place. The young woman who was soon to serve me was named Sheila Pratt. I was a little nervous, but since there were several other people ahead of me, I had a chance to calm down and think about what I wanted to say. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, but no matter how much I studied her, she was just as beautiful as I remembered her. It didn't take Sheila long to take care of the people in front of me, and then it was my turn. "Hi, Sheila," I said, stepping forward. She obviously didn't know I was in line and was surprised to see me in front of her. "Hi, Mick," she said after a moment's pause. "What can I do for you?" "I'd like to open an account. I need to transfer my paycheck into it." "Oh, sure. Let me get one of the staff to help you," she said, smiling. "Yes, thank you. It's good to see you again," I offered weakly. "Yes, it's good to see you too." The smile was genuine, it seemed to me. A week later, I went back to the bank to pick up my blank printed checks and saw Sheila again. This time she was walking down the street, I realized, delivering mail. I watched her as I stood in line and wondered what was going on in her life. There was only one way to find out. Taking a box of checks from the counter, I looked around for Sheila and saw her standing at the side counter, clearly not doing anything. I approached her. "Hello again," I said, smiling. "Hi, how are you?" she asked. Her smile was one I remembered from back when we were dating. She was sincere, honest, and very attractive. "I'm doing well. I'm working at Polar Industries right now. Doing sales," I offered. "Good for you. Do you like him?" "Does he have a good future?" she asked, looking interested. "Yes, I like the company and the products it represents. I guess I'm lucky." "Good, Mick. I'm glad to hear that." Uh-huh. Hmm. Sheila, would you like to have coffee with me or something else? I hesitantly asked. "We could catch up." "Sure, that would be great. I'll be free in a few minutes." "Why don't you wait for me and we could go to the coffee shop next door?" she suggested. "Great," I said with a wide smile. "I'll be waiting out front on a bench." Thus began our reunion, and after a few dates, we were back where we were. I was 21 years old and just starting my career, and Sheila was looking for a husband. The following spring, I proposed to her and she accepted. A year later, in May, we were married, and we were both excited about our future. A year and a half after the wedding, Angela was born. From the day she was born, she was a daddy's girl. When she was little, if she was upset or crying, I would take her in my arms, she would calm down, smile at me, and all was well again. I always thought I wanted a son, but Angie was everything I could have ever wanted. Our son Ben was born 2 years later, and I was happy as only a father can be. Sheila was Ben's special parent, and I was Angela's special parent. It was the perfect family, I thought. Sheila often told me the same thing. She was happy and content with our lives, she told me. We had our moments, but they never lasted long, and I knew I was lucky. I had a wonderful wife and 2 beautiful children. Right after Angie was born, I was given a sales territory, and I was over the moon. I fell into the job like a duck into water, and within a couple years, I was making almost double what I started out making. Success breeds success, and now I was earning much more than I expected when I started at Polar. 5 years later, we were able to buy our first house. It was a small bungalow, but it was ours alone. Sheila spent hours leafing through magazines looking for the right things. Angie and Ben contributed too, but it was Sheila who chose the decor and colors. I just stood in admiration of how my family came together. We celebrated our 10th anniversary at the same house, and over 30 people showed up for the anniversary party. I was proud of my accomplishments, but I was even prouder of my family. My children were well-behaved and excelled in school. My wife was an exemplary hostess and mother. Both parents believed that the sun and moon revolved around us. What more could I want? When Angie turned 14, she started menstruating. At first, Sheila was happy to help Angie understand what was happening and how to deal with it. Things went well for a few weeks, and then I noticed a change. Angie didn't seem to be as close to her mother as she used to be. It wasn't an obvious change, but to me, who was close to my daughter, it was noticeable. I could not find a reason for this change in attitude, and discussing it with Sheila proved frustrating. She did not want to discuss or even acknowledge this change. She claimed it was my imagination and a man's inability to understand female psychology. I was still concerned, but since the rest of the family didn't seem to be concerned, I let it go. Ben seemed to always be on guard. He and his mother were very close, and although I loved him as much as Angie, I knew that if there was a serious problem, he would turn to his mother for help first. It didn't bother me one bit. All families make alliances with their parents, and they were to be recognized and respected. Through my success, I continued to climb the career ladder. And while I realized that sales management was probably not what I was cut out for, I wanted to at least be offered the opportunity. I had my most productive and profitable territory, and I wondered what it would take to get to the next step. It finally dawned on me that in order for such an opportunity to arise, a position would have to be filled. Shortly after Angie entered high school, Sheila came to me and asked if I would mind if she went back to work. She had been a stay-at-home soccer mom for 16 years and felt she needed something to do besides washing, ironing, and sewing. I couldn't think of a single reason why not, but asked her to make sure that whatever she decided to do wouldn't interfere with the kids' lives and our ability to enjoy free time together. She assured me that it would not interfere. After a few months of searching, she found a job at a car dealership as a receptionist. It wasn't full-time, but it suited us both. She had to work there in the mornings from 9 to 1 o'clock, Monday through Saturday. Since I played golf on Saturday mornings, I figured that schedule would suit me just fine. The pay wasn't great, but we didn't starve and the extra income could be used as vacation pay. If it suited her, it suited me. Our life went on for a few more years until one day Sheila came home with a disturbing message. "You know what, Mick?" she said, not without some trepidation. "What?" "Terry Gilson's back in town," she said, watching my reaction carefully. "Oh, what brought him back?" "You know his father is a big businessman. Terry is now the assistant general manager at his father's dealership," she said, still not as nonchalant as she wanted to appear. "And what dealership is that?" I asked, knowing the answer perfectly well. Uh, our, where I work, Century Ford," she replied, stammering. "And what does that mean to you?" I asked, starting to realize that something else was creeping into the picture. Uh, I've been asked to take him on as an assistant," she finally mumbled. "Wow, that's a big step. From part-time receptionist to assistant to the assistant to the assistant general manager. I didn't realize they had such a large staff." I'm sure my tone was sarcastic and I didn't try to hide it. You don't sound very happy about something," she remarked. "No, you've been dating Gilson. I've been playing with him. We both know what kind of guy he is. He bragged about all his conquests. Is your name still on his list?" It was a cheap shot, and I realized it as soon as it sounded. "That's a terrible thing to say. Are you telling me you don't trust me?" she demanded. I had to pull back. "No, I'm saying I don't trust him." Her face reddened, and for the first time in a long, long time, she was truly angry. "Mick, take that back. You have no right to accuse me of anything. And what's more, you just said I can't be trusted," she muttered. "I didn't say anything of the sort. I said I didn't trust him. I said we both know what kind of snake he is. It may have been 20 years, but leopards don't change spots." I made sure she understood that I wouldn't back down an inch. "Just ask yourself," I continued. "How does a part-time secretary go from entry-level employee to assistant to the boss's son in one step? I'd like to know," I demanded. "Because I have the talent for the job," she snapped back. "Terry said I was just made for it. You don't think I have the ability, do you?" she asked. I don't. I don't work there, but I do know one thing. This whole deal is a typical Gilson deal. He's setting you up, and you'd better be very careful, my dear." Now I was standing right in front of her. She couldn't help but understand my misgivings and suspicions about Terry Gilson's motives. One could only hope that my message had reached her. "You're jealous. You don't want me to succeed because it will make you look bad. That's the thing. You're jealous," she scoffed. The argument was going nowhere and she wasn't listening. I sighed heavily, turned around and went down to the basement for a cold beer and some time to think. I had no illusions about Gilson's motives. He had seen an attractive woman he thought he could get without much effort. What did it matter that she was married? Perhaps he remembered me from high school and didn't think I was much of a liability. I would keep a close eye on the situation. Of that, I was sure. It was a week before we returned to the calm waters of home. My argument with Sheila had unfortunately been overheard by our children. It was hard not to overhear as we were both raising our voices. As always, once things had calmed down, Angie came to me when I was alone. Hi, Daddy. Are you okay? Hi, Angie. Yeah, I'm fine, I lied. I couldn't help but overhear the argument, she admitted. Who's the guy, Gilson? The one your mom dated in high school. He was our quarterback, and I played with him all year. I tried to warn your mom. He's not a very nice guy and doesn't have much respect for women, I said sadly. I don't think you told your mom what she wanted to hear, she said softly. No, I think not. I think she sees this as a big opportunity and important work. She's probably transitioning from part-time to full-time, so I think there will be some changes in our routine, I suggested. And that's okay, Dad. I can help with meals and laundry and stuff. I think she'll be making a lot more money now, don't you? Maybe. We haven't talked about it. I'll just wait and see, Angie. I hope this doesn't turn out to be a big mistake for your mom, I said, putting my hand on her shoulder and pulling her to me. I just hope everything turns out okay. As I'd suspected, it was a full-time job and the pay was more than double her previous earnings, so in that respect she was handsomely rewarded for her role. However, I had my doubts about the job. When I cautiously asked Sheila what she did during the day, she answered vaguely, but what I heard sounded very unstructured. If I interpreted her words correctly, it sounded as if she had to enlist help when Gilson called. As time went on, I cared less and less about her work. She left for work a little before 9 every morning and got home shortly after 5 in the evening. No overtime, no special assignments, just routine work. As a result, we didn't have to sacrifice much. My workday was longer than hers, and I would often get home after 6 and leave at 7 in the morning. I didn't have time to get up, so family time was limited to evenings and weekends. There was no way our life could be called hot. It just wasn't Sheila. Even if we did it a couple times a week, it was plain vanilla. I tried to get her interested in other things that were a little different, but she just wasn't interested. Since we were doing it twice a week, I couldn't complain. After Gilson came along, I kept a close eye on the changes in our intimate life, but there was nothing unusual about it. We were doing pretty much the same things we had been doing before. I always tried to get along with the neighbors. It makes life so much easier. The McDonalds on one side of us were quiet and rather elderly people. Their children had grown up and moved away, and we didn't have much in common with them. We were polite and helped each other if needed, but otherwise we were not close. The Romanos who lived on the other side of us were very different. Their children were younger, and Angie often babysat for them during the first few years we were there. We got along very well with them, and often had backyard barbecues and card parties at each other's houses. Jimmy and Felicia were probably our best friends. Jimmy was an accountant and worked at the big GM dealership in town. I had forgotten about it by now, but when he would come home in a rented van with the name of the dealership on the side, I remembered. One late Sunday morning, Jimmy was mowing the lawn before mowing, and I walked up to him for a minute to talk. "Hey, Jimmy, how's it going?" I began. "Well, the usual. I guess everything's okay?" He grinned. "Yeah, business as usual. Say, I have a question for you." I tried my best to make it sound casual. "Shoot. You work at a large dealership. Does the general manager usually have an assistant? I mean assistant general manager." "Yes, large dealerships usually have someone to back up the boss when he's not around." "Would that assistant have an assistant like, say, Friday Girl?" He looked at me strangely, and then I saw a few light bulbs light up in his eyes. His face turned funny, and he looked very uncomfortable. "Not usually," he finally said. "I didn't think so," I said, nodding. "Thanks, Jimmy." I turned and headed back toward the house. My suspicions were confirmed. "Mick?" he called out to me. I stopped and turned around as he came toward me. "I know what you're thinking. I have some acquaintances there. Let me see if I can find out anything about CT," he said in a low voice. I stared at him for what seemed like a very long time, then nodded. "Thanks again." I don't know why. After all that, I asked Jimmy that question. Perhaps I was afraid of the answer. There hadn't been the slightest hint that anything was going on, but apparently the thought had kept me on my toes, and still did. Jimmy knew who Sheila worked for and what her position was, but he never said a word about it. I just stumped him, and he reacted the way a good friend should. Even though Sheila was no longer working on Saturday morning, I continued to play golf early into the morning. Saturday, after my conversation with Jimmy, turned out to be cool and windy, but at least it didn't rain. I played with our usual foursome, and none of us played very well. Adding to the wind was the cold, and none of us were comfortable. We were all glad to finish the round and get to the clubhouse. As usual, after the break, we met at the 19th hole, and the winners toasted the losers. Today's winners were myself and my partner. As I entered the lounge, I saw Jimmy Romano sitting alone at a table by the TV. He was sipping a drink, so I approached him. "I didn't know you played golf," I said with a smile. "I don't know. You know me better than that," he laughed. "What brings you here?" I asked, almost guessing the answer. "I wanted to talk to you alone," he said, suddenly becoming serious. I nodded. I was sure that was the case. "Give me a minute to settle with the winners, and I'll be right back," I promised. It didn't take me long to buy drinks for the boys and explain that I had to step away to meet someone. 5 minutes later, I was already sitting at Jimmy's desk. "So I can assume you heard something about my recent question," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Yes, I wish I had better news, Mick. I really wish I had," he said sadly, almost not looking me in the eye. "Tell me straight, Jimmy. I can handle it," I said with more confidence than I felt at that moment. "Gilson is probably the most unpopular guy in this dealership. The people I've talked to think he's a leech on the side of the business and completely useless. He goes around pissing off everyone he encounters. He has nothing to do because no one wants him to do anything. He'll only mess things up, as he's proven more than once." Jimmy stopped and sipped from his glass. "No surprise there," I said, trying to remain calm. "So where's Sheila?" He looked at me with a tired look that I'd never seen on his face before. He really didn't feel like telling me what he was about to tell me. "Sheila sits in his office most of the day, occasionally typing letters and bringing him coffee. The only time she acts fast is when old man Gilson shows up, and she quickly disappears into the parts department or the employee break room. When the old man leaves, everything goes back to normal," Jimmy says. "I guess old man Gilson doesn't know about Sheila and her mysterious job," I said sullenly. Jimmy only nodded. Then he paused, and I realized that there was more to it. "Spill it, Jimmy. I won't bite," I promised. "The two of them go out to lunch about twice a week. They leave before noon and don't get back until 2 or 2:30. "Since she works there?" I asked, completely shocked. "No. It started a few months later," he suggested. "One day, one of their slick traveling salesmen followed them. They went to the Carlton Hotel in Banner Road. A long way for lunch," I suggested. "Mick, there's no restaurant at the Carlton," he said in almost a whisper. I felt everything inside me clench. I was locked in place, unable to move. I could hear my own intermittent breathing trying to get my thoughts in order. Although I suspected this could happen, I wasn't prepared for it. I don't remember how long it took before I was able to form a coherent thought. "I'm sorry, Mick. I really didn't mean to be the guy who," he muttered. "I know," I whispered hoarsely. I didn't want to hear that either. We had another drink with Jimmy and reminisced about the good times our families had spent together. There were many happy memories, but we felt like we were saying goodbye to each other. I think we both realized that things would never be the same again. I felt that pain in my gut, and it hurt. I drove home, preparing to see Sheila and thinking about how I was going to handle this revelation. I had been strangely calm with Jimmy, and it seemed odd that I would be able to handle this devastating news. I tried to imagine a scenario in which their afternoon visits to the Carlton would become anything other than intimate, but realized it was unlikely. What was on the surface was still there. It wasn't until I was halfway home from the golf club that I started to get angry. My mind was spinning 1,000 random thoughts at once. My emotions were in turmoil until it all came down to one horrible fact. She had cheated on me, and cheated on me many, many times. I was a fool, even though I knew the possibility existed. She made a fool of me and didn't even blink an eye, without the slightest sense of guilt. Day after day, she made me a cuckold. It was then, after that realization, that anger was born in me. I pride myself on being prudent and not prone to rash behavior. I pulled over to the curb a few blocks from my house because I knew I was in no condition to go into my house and confront Sheila. Moreover, it wouldn't be the smartest thing to do. Moreover, I was sure it wouldn't. If I thought it was just a one-time affair, I would have accepted it and we could move on with our lives. But it wasn't. Apparently, it had been going on for a year. All this time, Sheila had been playing the role of a happy housewife with a loving family. It was a deception of a very high order. Sitting in my idling car, I decided that this called for a very high measure of retribution. I would behave as normally as possible, but on Monday, I would begin the process to put an end to this farce and seek revenge. I am determined that I will cause Terry Gilson and Sheila Pratt Turvey as much harm as possible. I will act in accordance with the rules and the law, but I will do everything I can to bring them both down. The rest of the weekend passed with excruciating politeness on my part. I kept a low profile, not letting my anger and frustration spill out onto my family. There was plenty of time for that when all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I counted the hours until Monday morning. When Monday finally came, I got up earlier than usual and was out of the house well before 7. I knew I had a few hours before I could get to work on my problem, but I wanted to get out of our house as soon as possible that morning. I knew that my sales manager, Larry Coleman, was already in the office, and I needed to talk to him about taking some time out of his day to work on my problem. Our conversation took over half an hour. I knew he had guessed what might be going on in my family life when I explained what I wanted in terms of a vacation, and thankfully he was receptive and agreed. He turned out to be a nice guy, and I enjoyed working with him. Just after 9 in the morning, I called David Murnay, our family lawyer, and asked for advice on a family matter. I knew this was not his specialty and was not surprised when he referred me to Lydia Pankratz. I had met Lydia in passing once or twice and had heard she was a very good divorce attorney. She wouldn't come cheap, but at this point the expense was the last thing on my mind. That afternoon, I had an appointment with Lydia for late afternoon. I knew I was going to be late, so I called home to leave a message. Angie picked up the phone, which surprised me. "Hi, Angie. What are you doing home?" "Teacher Professional Development Day," she said with a slight chuckle. "Ever notice how they're always on Fridays or Mondays?" "Yeah, I've noticed. Look, I have a late meeting tonight and I won't be home until 7, I think. Let Mom know, okay?" "Sure, Dad." "Say, are you okay?" she asked with curiosity in her voice. "Yeah, sure. Why do you ask?" "I don't know. You weren't like yourself this weekend. You weren't sick or anything, were you?" "No," I lied. "I'm fine." "You must have an overactive imagination," I laughed. We signed off and I hung up the phone, wondering if Sheila had noticed my unusual behavior. She didn't say anything, but maybe she was being cautious. I'd have to watch for that. I didn't want to tip too soon. Meeting Lydia came as a shock to him in many ways. To begin with, whatever the reason, Sheila got half of everything in the divorce. The house, the cars, everything. The only good news was that her income was such that I probably wouldn't have to pay alimony if I could prove infidelity. Judging by her reckless behavior, I doubted I would have a hard time getting proof. As for the children, I would have to prove abuse, neglect, or some other horrible crime to get custody. In this jurisdiction, children were almost always given to the mother. Angie was 18 and could make her own decision, but Ben was only 16 and would have to spend almost 2 years with his mother. I felt bad, but Lydia said I probably couldn't change anything. It's just the way the system works. That's when things got interesting. Lydia knew about my overwhelming desire to punish both Sheila and Gilson and said she could help. Since Gilson was her boss, I could sue both him and the company he worked for as co-defendants in the divorce case. In other words, since so many people knew about their little game and did nothing to stop it or report it, we could sue them for a very large amount of money. And even better, none of that money would go to Sheila. Lydia said she would make inquiries about Century Ford and begin the paperwork for the divorce proceedings. At this point, the question of the cause of the divorce remained open. I was to decide whether it would be irreconcilable differences or infidelity. Lydia suggested that since their liaisons were so predictable, it would not be difficult or expensive to get some photographic evidence to bolster the case. I told her I would think about it. When I got home that evening, I was greeted by a happy Sheila, who informed me that my dinner was already in the oven and poured me a glass of wine. I was immediately suspicious. Such behavior was unusual for her. I went upstairs, changed my clothes, washed my face, and went down to dinner. When I sat down at the table, Sheila sat down as well, and also with a glass of wine. "I have some interesting news, Mick," she began, smiling broadly. "Yeah?" "I've been invited to the Regional Dealer Convention next month in Marysville," she said proudly. "Really? Just you?" I asked, almost knowing the answer before I even asked it. "Well, no. Terry and Kurt Jenkins are coming too," she said with some nervousness. Oh, I see. And how long does this convention last? 3 days. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll be back on Sunday. Now the nervousness was fully evident. Sounds like you're looking forward to it, I grumbled. Yeah, this will be my first convention. I'm sure I'll learn a lot. She changed instantly. Now she had that happy enthusiasm in her again that she had a moment ago. Yes, I don't doubt that, I replied with a touch of sarcasm. As my mind caught up with my emotions, I began to realize that this might be the opportunity I was looking for. She almost set herself up to be caught. So, are you okay with this? She asked uncertainly. Yes, sweetheart. I'm okay with it. I trust you. I know you won't do anything inappropriate, I said, with as straight a face as I was capable of. I only saw the blush on her face for a moment before she stood up, leaned across the table, and kissed me. Thanks, Mick. I finished my meal in silence, and Sheila went back into the living room to watch some mindless TV program. I found it odd that I wasn't upset or angry or anything. I was numb. I had just let my wife go out of town for 3 days and have fun with some asshole I hated, and I felt nothing. The next 2 days went fine. Just fine. I was doing okay at work, but my head was a mess, and I was wondering how it was all going to turn out. I started thinking about Ben and Angie. What would they think? How would they react? When I destroyed their mother, would they hate me? I couldn't think of a way to protect them from what I was about to do, other than to call the whole thing off and let Sheila continue doing what she was doing. Deep down, I knew I would never let that happen. Thursday morning, Lydia called me at my office and asked me to meet with her after lunch. We set a time for 3, and I arrived early. I wanted to bring her up to speed and start the process. I made a few decisions. Lydia, something interesting happened on Monday. Sheila told me that she has been invited to attend the regional Ford dealer convention in 3 weeks in Marysville. It won't surprise you to learn that she'll be going with Terry Gilson and another guy from their office. I paused, waiting for her reaction. You're right. There's nothing surprising about that. My sources say this whole thing was set up a long time ago. I guess she finally got up the courage to tell you on Monday, she said calmly. Yes, Monday. How did you find out? I asked with a smile. Well, it's a trade secret, but let's just say she's not as smart as she thinks she is, Lydia grinned. I've decided that we should try to get some pictures. Will that allow us to file an infidelity report? I asked. Yes, definitely. Now we know they use the same hotel room every time. That's silly. My friend is getting some photographic evidence this week, and that'll be enough to make a case. But that's not all, she grinned. I watched her satisfied smile and waited for the next piece of news. Century Ford is owned by Terry Gilson's father, Knox Gilson, as you probably know. I know there is a morals clause in every employee's contract, and this will make additional litigation much easier for us. In fact, it will be a piece of cake, she smiled slyly. How much do you think we can get them for? I asked, feeling an evil streak awaken in me. Well, probably between $500,000 and $1 million, but of course we'll ask for a lot more. God knows Father Terry can afford it, she laughed. I really like the sound of that. I guess the only bad thing is the kids. I can protect Angie, but I can't do anything for Ben, I said, suddenly realizing how fast things were moving. I know, and there's not a damn thing I can do about it. Unless we get a judge who thinks Sheila is scum, we're going to have to live with it. I'm sorry, but I wish it wasn't so, she said with genuine pity. All right, Lydia. Thanks for the shovel work. I'll let you know when and where the convention is and what hotel she's staying at, in case your boyfriend can't figure anything out before then. I was tired. All this confusion had drained me of all my energy. I wanted to go home and go to bed for a week or 3, hoping it would all be over by then. Of course, I realized that wasn't going to happen. There was still a long way to go. I managed to get through the next 3 weeks without arousing Sheila's suspicions. Maybe she wasn't paying attention, or maybe she was so sure of herself that she didn't worry about it. On the eve of her departure, she packed her things and carried her suitcase and travel bag to the front door, preparing to leave in the morning. She had no idea what was in store for her this weekend. When I got up Thursday morning at the usual time, Sheila was already up and eating breakfast. She was definitely anxious to get on the road as soon as possible, and she paced nervously around the kitchen. You're up early, I remarked coldly. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everything was taken care of before I left. Don't worry about that. Angie will take care of the household chores and I'll help her on the weekends. I take it you'll be home Sunday morning? I suggested. I'm not sure if it will be in the morning or afternoon. We'll have to wait and see. It's Terry's car, so I'll let you know, she said hesitantly. She avoided my gaze. She knew what she had to do, but she didn't want to look me in the eye and admit it to herself. She didn't need to know that there was no getting away from this weekend. Have a good time and be on top of it, I said without a fraction of sarcasm. She threw me a brief glance and then continued her uncoordinated activity. I couldn't recall ever seeing her so nervous. Perhaps she sensed a change in my attitude and was afraid I might recognize or suspect something. I couldn't tell. I finished my coffee, kissed her lightly on the cheek, and left for the office. All day I wondered if she thought I knew something. It could have ruined my surprise, and then I would have been very upset. I didn't tell Lydia or anyone else what I planned to do early Sunday morning. After getting to the office, I called Lydia, and she quickly picked up the phone. Lydia, can you confirm that we have pictures of Gilson and Sheila in action? I quickly asked. Yes, we have them, but I don't think you'll want to see them. Maybe after this is over, but in the meantime, let us handle this, okay? She spoke in a muffled voice, and you couldn't tell from her tone that she wasn't happy. I assumed the pictures would be quite defamatory. The only upside was that now it no longer mattered whether my little stunt on Sunday morning had worked or not. The matter was now settled. Are all the divorce papers ready? Yes. We can file them when you say so. I have a little surprise for her on Sunday morning, so I think we can deliver it to her parents' house on Monday morning. Can I confirm that on Sunday? I asked. Yeah, but, Mick, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you? There was concern in her voice. No, absolutely not. I'm not going to do anything that would mess things up, I promise. I hoped my words had put this dynamic lady at ease. I didn't want anything to ruin my plans. Good, I'm glad to hear that. Take care of yourself, Mick. I know these are hard times for you, but they'll pass and you'll move on, I know it, she said sincerely. Lydia, I couldn't have done it without your help. The only thing that remains difficult is telling the kids on Saturday about what's going on. I'm not looking forward to it, I admitted. I'm sure you're not. Good luck with that. If you need anything, call me or David, okay? Thanks, I signed off and silently hung up. I thought about telling the kids tonight, but changed my mind. Perhaps one of them would decide to call their mother and warn her. I wanted to minimize that risk. Sheila called around 8 o'clock that evening and her voice was very chipper. She really enjoyed the convention and the various booths. She had a nice room, and the restaurant served very good food. She talked to me briefly, but spent more time on the phone with Angie and Ben. She gave us her room number, 1228. When the kids went to bed at the usual time, 10 o'clock, I waited until I was sure they were asleep and then called the hotel and asked for room 1228. If Sheila answered, I just wished her good night and said something nice. The phone rang at least 7 or 8 times, but there was no answer. I hung up. Sheila called on Friday night, again around the same time. As before, we had a brief conversation, and then she talked to Angie and Ben. She spoke differently. Perhaps the excitement of the convention had passed, or maybe something else? On Saturday, she called early, just before 6 o'clock. Luckily, we were all home. Once again, our conversation was short and not very personal. She was going out to dinner with a large group and, according to her, wouldn't be home until late. I wasn't displeased. I was relieved. When Angie, Ben, and I sat down to dinner, the table was very quiet. We all seemed to be immersed in our own thoughts. Finally, I realized that I couldn't put it off any longer. We cleared the table, put the dishes in the dishwasher, and I turned to them both. Kids, I need to talk to you about something, I began. Ben and Angie looked at me, and I sensed that they had an inkling of what it was about. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just tell you what's going to happen. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 shiny new house keys. These are your new keys to this house. The only person who has them is me. Your mother is not coming back to our house, I finally forced myself to say. Angie gasped. Ben's eyes widened and his mouth dropped open. For a year now, your mother has been having an affair with her boss, Terry Gilson. She betrayed me, you, and her marriage vows. I can't live with her anymore and I won't allow her in this house. I paused. Oh, Dad, oh no, Angie cried. Why would she do that? I don't know, but to be completely honest, it's not the most important thing on my mind right now. I know it's going to hurt you. There's nothing I can do about it. She's been seeing Mr. Gilson at least twice a week for the last year. That's over 100 times. My anger started to come out and I saw Ben wrinkle his nose slightly. This convention she's attending, it's nothing more than a smokescreen so they can be together for the weekend. Well, they're not fooling anyone, I grumbled. Dad, what happens next? Ben asked, still shocked by my statements. I've filed for divorce and your mother will be served with papers as soon as she gets back into town. Some other things will happen with Mr. Gilson, but you don't need to worry about them now. I will inform you of them as they arise. I paused again. They must have been shocked by my comments over the last 5 minutes. Does this mean I'll never see Mom again? Ben asked, on the verge of tears. No, I wouldn't do that to you, Ben. I know how important she is to you and I wouldn't do that. Maybe you'll live with her from the beginning. When you're 18, like Angie, you can see both of us anytime you want. Angie, you'll be able to decide where you want to live. It will be your choice, I said, looking into my daughter's sad eyes. That sucks, Dad. It's splitting the family apart. It sucks, she said with tears in her eyes. Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's the courts that make those decisions, not me. I've thought long and hard about this. I suppose I could tell your mother everything I know and just move on with my life, but I can't do that. I have to admit, I'm very, very angry with your mother. She lied to us. She lied to us. I don't think I can just turn the other cheek, I admitted. Ben turned and quietly walked up the stairs to his room and closed the door behind him. He's in shock, I thought. I'll go up and sit with him for a while when he's had time to realize what's about to happen. I turned to Angela, and she looked at me sadly and then stepped toward me and hugged me. I'm so sorry, Daddy. I know how much it hurts. I can't believe she did it again, she cried. I threw my head back and stared at my daughter. Again? Angie nodded, lowering her eyes. Tell me, please, I said quietly. It was 4 years ago. My period had just started, and I was having trouble getting my period. One morning when I was in class, I started having severe cramps. I went to the nurse and she sent me home with a note from my mom about what to get. When I went into the house, she and Mr. Morissette were sitting on the couch. I must have screamed and ran upstairs to my room. I heard them talking and moving around and then the door slammed shut. A few minutes later, my mom came into my room. At this point, Angie broke down and the tears began to flow in earnest. What happened next? I had to be patient. I had to let Angie tell me in her own way. Mom said if I told you or anyone else, you'd get divorced and I'd never see you again. She said the courts always give custody to Mom, and you'll be so mad at her that you'll probably move out and I won't see you at all. She looked up at me and shook her head. I was scared, Daddy. I believed her. I couldn't lose you. Not then, not ever again. I guess I promised Mom I wouldn't tell anyone. Except Ben, I haven't told anyone until now. I put my arms around her again and pulled her to me. That conniving bitch had used Angie's love for me against herself and blackmailed her into silence. So Gilson wasn't the first and he wasn't the only one. I began to wonder how many there could have been. How could I have been so stupid? How had she managed to pull all this off without me suspecting a thing? Had I been so stupid that I hadn't noticed what was going on? Or was she smarter than I gave her credit for? Angie, I don't know what to tell you except that I love you. I'm going to do everything in my power to be a good father, no matter what happens in the future. You're old enough to make your own decisions, and I want you to know that whatever decision you make, I will support you, and it won't change my love for you. I didn't think I could say anything else. Thank you, Dad. I know that, and I know I want to be here with you. You need someone, and I think you're stuck with me. She smiled through her tears. We hugged again. I think I better go upstairs and talk to Ben. I'm sure this is going to be really hard for him to get over. You said you told him about Mr. Morissette? Yes, about a month after it happened. Ben said she was acting strange and noticed that Mom and I were avoiding each other. I told him about what I'd seen. And how did he react? I asked. Funny. Like it wasn't a big surprise or maybe he suspected something, Angie replied thoughtfully. I was sure he'd think I was lying, but he didn't say anything at all. He just pouted his lips and didn't say anything. I nodded and stood up, heading for the stairs and Ben's room. I knocked softly, then turned the knob and gently pushed the door open. Ben was sitting on the bed, staring blankly out the window. It took a few seconds before he acknowledged me, but he still didn't say anything. I'm sorry, Ben. You know I wouldn't hurt you if I could help it. I hope you understand I couldn't leave it at that, I said quietly. He nodded and turned to me. I'm sorry too, Dad. Mom really hurt a lot of people, didn't she? He said in a barely audible whisper. Yeah, yeah, I don't know what will come out of all this, but I'm sure your grandparents will be very upset with her, I replied. Why, Dad? Why? I have no idea, Ben. She's never once hinted to me that she's unhappy or dissatisfied with her life. Not a single hint, I repeated. I hate her. He muttered suddenly. No, no, don't do that, Ben. She loves you. You can be sure of that. It's something else, something I don't understand. Maybe she doesn't either. But don't let your anger consume you. I know you love her. Perhaps in time you can forgive her. I know she would never want to hurt you or Angie. Never, I said in as positive a tone as possible. He turned to me again with a devastated look. I put my hand on his shoulder to reassure him. After a few minutes, I got up and walked out of his room, closing the door behind me. After I woke up Sunday morning, all hell broke loose. Sheila tried to call home, but I got Angie and Ben on the phone and we headed out for breakfast. We may not have had an appetite, but we needed to get out of the house. I turned off my phone and asked Angie to do the same with hers. I didn't want Sheila to piss her off over nothing. I told the kids what I had done by calling early in the morning and Angie laughed. Ben smiled, and I realized they approved of him. Why didn't I feel better then? After breakfast, we drove to the park by the river and the three of us went for a walk. I think in some strange way we all felt better. Perhaps because the tension and anticipation of what was about to happen had subsided. Angie and Ben knew what was going to happen next and knew when it would happen. I, on the other hand, had a knot tied in my stomach that didn't want to loosen in any way. I was beginning the process that would end with the dissolution of my marriage and the breakup of my family. I still had to talk to my parents, but that was one of the two important things I had to do today. Of course, I also needed to call Lydia and tell her what I had done. I was afraid to talk to George and Amy Pratt, Sheila's parents. We were close, and they adored their grandchildren. I wasn't sure how they would take the news or what side they would take. I decided to leave things as they were until Sheila made her own decision. She needed a place to live, and I suspected she would run home. I called Lydia Pankratz first. I told her about my little stunt, and she laughed at my recklessness too. Now that's something I'd never want to get, she grinned. I hope you enjoyed yourself, Mick. Not really. Cheap revenge, I guess. But now she knows, and she knows some of the consequences, I said, noticing the note of anger in my voice. Well, what about the kids, Mick? I talked to them last night, and I think things are stable. They're not very happy, as you can imagine, but they understand everything. And I think we'll have to wait and see what the long-term effects on them will be, I said. But I have one more surprise. What? Lydia looked confused for a moment. Angie told me that about 4 years ago she caught her mother with another man. Sheila threatened Angie. She told her that I would divorce her, she would get custody, and they would never see each other again. She blackmailed her into keeping quiet, I concluded. Oh my God, could she really do that? Lydia asked in amazement. I thought I knew her. I was wrong. I don't know her at all. She's just a disgusting woman, I said, more with regret than anger. Lydia was clearly contemplating what to do next. After a few moments of silence, she spoke again. Stay close to Angie and Ben, Mick. They need you around. It's going to be hell for them for a while. Be there for them, she concluded. Thanks again for your help, Lydia. As soon as I know where Sheila ends up, I'll let you know and you can take care of her. We signed off and I slammed the phone down. It was going to be much harder to get through to my parents now. The conversation with my parents was frustratingly short. I described the situation, and their first reaction was concern for Angie and Ben. I told them that I had spoken to them last night and that they were fine today. That seemed to calm my mom down, and they both said they would talk to us later when things had settled down. I wondered when that would happen myself. I turned the phone off again. It beeped, letting me know it was expecting a call, and I was sure it was Sheila. She wasn't on my list to talk to today. Angie, Ben, and I sat down on a picnic bench in the park, and I explained that I didn't want to be near our house for the next few hours. I expected their mother to rush home and try to get in. Finding that her key was useless, She would surely raise a ruckus. I suggested we go out of town and stay there until a late dinner and then come back. They agreed, and we discussed where we could go. There was an open-air fair in a small town a few miles south, and we decided to see what it was all about. The fair turned out to be very interesting and fun. We grabbed some hot dogs to snack on and overall enjoyed the old-fashioned country fair. It took our minds off our problems and allowed us to think about something else. We didn't get back into town until almost 7 and stopped at a nice restaurant for dinner. We knew that sooner or later we would have to face changes in our lives, but this last day was a chance to take our minds off of it all and find peace and quiet. When we got home, it was almost 9 o'clock. Sheila was nowhere to be seen and the house was dark. I parked the car in the garage and we went inside, turning on the lights as we went. Nothing had changed in the house since we left for breakfast this morning. The kids had gone to their rooms and were getting ready for bed. I turned on the TV, but there was nothing interesting on, so I went to bed as well. It was a restless night. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I knew that my phone call and serving the divorce papers would have consequences. It was only a matter of time. Monday morning, I reconnected the phones again. I didn't expect to hear from Sheila so early. My mistake. Almost immediately, the phone rang. We didn't have caller ID, so I had no idea who would be calling this early. I decided to tempt fate. Hello? It was a cautious greeting on my part. Mick, please. We need to talk. I was Sheila, of course. What is there to talk about? I asked in a low voice, trying not to disturb the kids. Oh my God, Mick, I'll tell you this. I can explain it. It's not what you think, she moaned. That's the second time you've said that. What do you think I think? I challenged. It wasn't like an affair, it was just a stupid mistake. Don't ruin our marriage over a stupid mistake, she pleaded. You must think I'm the stupidest person on the planet, Sheila. I know for a fact that you've been having fun with Jerk Gilson for a year, no less. And now, I know that Francis Morissette is one of your buddies. We've got pictures and all the proof we need. It won't be pretty, Sheila. And you have no one to blame but yourself. I promise it's going to be ugly. With those words, I hung up and disconnected the phone again. When I got to work, I informed Larry Coleman that I was divorcing my wife, and if she called, I would ask him not to transfer the call. He agreed and immediately went to Gloria's switchboard to inform her of our request. I went back to my office and tried to burrow into the papers on my desk. Everything was going well until about 11 o'clock in the morning when the phone rang. It was George Pratt, my father-in-law. Good morning, George. I can guess why you're calling. I apologize for not giving you and Amy advance notice. I said preemptively. I think I understand, but I'd like to hear it from you, Mick. You've always been honest with me, so tell me what the hell happened. He asked reproachfully. I recounted to Sheila my warnings about Gilson, what I'd learned about her affair with him, and her other connections with Morissette. When I finished with a condensed version of her activities, a long silence hung on the line. My God, he finally said slowly and quietly. I had no idea she was capable of such a thing. Are you absolutely sure about this, Mick? He asked, hoping there was a glimmer of relief in his words. I'm very sorry, George. I'm afraid I'm not only sure, but I have photographic evidence, I said, feeling sorry for this fine man. He deserved better from his daughter. She's staying here for now, Mick. Are you planning to start divorce proceedings? Yes, all the paperwork is ready. She'll be delivered either at work or... I'm sorry, but it can happen at your house, I apologized. I understand. I don't mind telling you that it will hurt not only her, but her mother as well. I know it's not your fault, but... Anyway, it doesn't matter. I hope we'll still enjoy visiting our grandchildren, Mick, he finished hopefully. Of course we will. This isn't about you or Amy, George. I would never do that to you or the kids. You're always welcome here, I said sincerely. Thanks, Mick. I'm sorry, but thanks, he said sadly, and hung up. When I put the phone back on the stand, I was emotionally drained. I expected there would be more moments like this in the coming weeks and months. I had to prepare for them. I learned that Sheila had gone to work that morning and, surprisingly, hadn't lost it yet. Gilson had no idea that all of this would come crashing down on his head at some point, and apparently decided to let it go. When Lydia confirmed that my wife was on time for work, she sent a bailiff to her, and no sooner had she had her morning coffee than the divorce papers were in her hands. According to observers, She immediately jumped up from her seat and ran out of the building. I'm guessing she ran to her parents' house. But that wasn't the most interesting part. Shortly thereafter, Terry Gilson and Knox Gilson were served with court orders stating my intent to sue for damages based on alienation of affection and willful disregard for corporate responsibility, specifically failure to comply with the morals clause in specific employee contracts. The claims included punitive and compensatory damages in the amount of $5 million. The circus had begun. Reconstructing the story much later, I learned that Knox Gilson had a showdown with his son Terry and practically cut him off from the company. No more easy assignments, no more rescues from situations with angry husbands, and, unless he pulled himself together, no more inheritance. Knox had indulged his son for the past 20-odd years, and he was finally starting to get a good life. Sooner or later, this rising teenager was going to have to get back on his feet. Terry did the completely predictable thing. He went out and got drunk. Since he was kicked out of the car dealership, he had nowhere to go but to his townhouse. He disappeared into this cave for days. I knew the wheels of justice would turn slowly. Foolishly, Sheila decided to contest the divorce until Lydia provided her attorney with the evidence we had, including photographs. That was enough to beat the truth out of her. Lydia would do her best to limit the amount of my financial punishment, but worst-case scenario, she would get half of everything. A reward for her perfidy. The week passed agonizingly slowly. I went to work, but I couldn't pretend to be efficient. Larry was very understanding and patient, but I knew it couldn't go on like this forever. I needed to think about my future as a single man and a single parent. It was a daunting prospect. On Saturday, I was mowing the lawn in the backyard when I heard a noise in the driveway. A car door slammed, and seconds later I heard someone pounding on my front door. Neither Angie nor Ben was home, so I walked around the side of the house and ran head-on into Terry Gilson. He looked like he'd been dragged behind a farm tractor for several miles. He was a mess, but at one look at his face, I knew it wasn't good. That was the last thing I remembered before he hit me with his big right fist. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital. I wasn't fully awake yet, but I was starting to experience small bouts of unconsciousness. I was lying on my back and felt a numbing pain from my head to my groin. Apparently, it had taken me over 24 hours to finally regain consciousness. I floated back and forth, barely picking up scraps of present and current. At one point, I realized that there was someone next to me. I could feel someone's hand, but I couldn't open my eyes, or at least I didn't want to. They were like two marbles rolling around in the bottom of a tin can. I heard an unfamiliar voice, but although it was familiar, I couldn't connect it to my memories to see who it could have been. I tried to remember what could have brought me to this place, and after a while I remembered Gilson's face and then his fist. A day or so later, I found that Mom and Angie were at my bedside almost the entire time I was in the ICU. I tried to smile at them, but it hurt. And I hope they realized how grateful I was to have them around. I think I heard Angie say that Ben was coming over after school, and I tried to smile again. Just thinking about it hurt. It was over a week before I recovered enough to talk to my doctor. He started literally from the beginning. I had a concussion from hitting the wooden frame at the garage door when Gilson hit me. My right shoulder was dislocated, and the top of my right arm was badly bruised. I had 3 and possibly 4 broken ribs. My kidneys were badly bruised, and my other internal organs were even more damaged. My testicles were badly swollen, and it was feared that I might lose one or both of them. I ended up having my spleen removed when it was discovered that it had ruptured. My injuries were the result of one punch from an enraged Terry Gilson, followed by systematic kicking as I lay unconscious on the ground. What saved me was that Felicia Romano, who had witnessed most of the altercation, screamed bloody murder from her kitchen window, causing Gilson to look up and realize he was being watched. He rushed to his car, pulled out of our driveway, and rubber-tired the entire block. Felicia had the good sense to call 911, and that's how I ended up in the hospital. Gilson was identified by Felicia and another neighbor who recognized the license plate number of his car when it sped down our street, nearly hitting a mother with a stroller. There aren't many white 1964 Ford Galaxy convertibles in our town, and a couple hours later, Gilson was seen leaving a bar and driving away inadequately. To top off all the woes, Gilson was arrested for DUI and resisting arrest. He just didn't know when to quit. When they put him in a cell, they remembered the assault complaint filed by Mrs. Felicia Romano and my hospitalization. After questioning Felicia, they charged Gilson with aggravated assault, assault with intent, and criminal trespassing. He was in deep shit, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. When he called his dad from prison, Knox Gilson didn't pick up. I wish I could have been there. But I was unconscious and lying on the operating table having my spleen removed. 2 days after I began having permanent epiphanies, a plainclothes officer came to me and asked me to testify. I told him everything I remembered, which wasn't much. A face red with anger and a big fist. He asked what might have prompted the attack, and I told him about Terry's affair with my wife, the divorce, and the lawsuits. He nodded a couple times, thanked me, and left. Epilogue. The property division decision in the divorce was not too favorable to Sheila. I will be buying her share of our house. She was awarded the absolute minimum and no alimony, as well as an emphatic lecture on her contribution to my injuries. Knox fired both Terry and Sheila. She was on the job hunt when our divorce became final. Her name was toxic in some circles, and I doubted she would ever find a decent job in our town. Ben lives with Sheila, but from what I gather from Angie's words, their relationship isn't what it used to be. I see Ben every week on weekends. We got a break from the judge. He seems to be getting stronger, but he's not the same kid I remember from better times. Angie is Angie. She's my girlfriend and makes sure I'm on top of things. She manages the house, my diet and exercise program. If I didn't know better, she could have been my mother. My folks have been a pillar of support for us and have helped us when needed. They have no idea how important that has been these past few weeks. I just didn't need to put any more pressure on them. George and Amy, thank goodness, have remained friends. They are deeply disappointed in Sheila, but she is their only child, and they feel obligated to support her in her time of need. Having Ben around is a big plus for them. In a way, they're spoiling him, but I don't mind. I just want Ben to get through this and come out in one piece. Angie comes in for a visit. She and her mother talk to each other again, but I get the impression it's an awkward relationship at best. The lawsuits, of course, never made it to court. According to my lawyer friends Dave and Lydia, Knox Gilson won't let that happen. We'll settle for a very large sum, and I'll be secured for years to come, even after taxes and legal fees. I already know I'll be able to pay for Angie and Ben's college tuition and provide them with a car. At least some good will come out of this whole mess. Physically, I've recovered as much as I can. I lost my spleen, but my kidneys, ribs, and shoulder are almost healed. I go to physical therapy 3 times a week and will continue to do so for a while longer. I still have pains that come and go daily. The doctor thinks my testicles are functioning at 80%, but I haven't had a chance to have them tested yet. I don't have much enthusiasm for the opposite sex right now. When I have money after the trial, I intend to buy Jimmy and Felicia something special. Jimmy has been there for me when I needed him, and Felicia may have saved my life. Nothing would be too extravagant for these two. What happens next, I ask myself regularly. I'm still reeling from what Sheila did to us, but I suppose in time I'll get over the worst of it. I quit Polar Industries, or at least try to. Larry didn't want to hear about it and said he was giving me an indefinite leave of absence. Someday I'd have a lot of money, and I was trying to decide what to do with it. I think I know. Frank Clay, one of my best customers and an old friend from when I first started in sales, wants to retire and sell his building materials business. It's a good business with a well-balanced trade between retail and building clients. He is part of the Build Right buying group, and that helps him compete with the big stores. Dave Murney and I are going to meet with old Frank and see if we can make it happen. Ben was first in line to look for weekend and summer work when he heard about my plan. It doesn't change anything. I want to keep him close and make sure he's okay while he experiences the next few years. Adolescence is hard enough as it is, and then there's the broken family. I look at Knox and Terry Gilson and realize that this is what happens when you are not involved in your children's lives or not close enough to them. I have had a lot of time to think about what has happened to me and our family. I will be the first to admit that I took it personally and wanted revenge to the fullest. I still feel the same way. Perhaps if I had only had to deal with Gilson, things would have been different. I guess I can imagine how he could have bewitched and charmed someone like Sheila. But when I learned about Morissette and how she blackmailed our daughter into silence, all thoughts of compassion vanished. Dave says Terry will spend 2 to 4 years in prison for assaulting me. We've talked about a civil suit too, but there will be no one to file it. His father disowned him. He has no job, no skills, and no prospects. When he gets out of prison, he'll be in his early 50s and a bleak future awaits him. There's nothing more we can do to hurt him. Amazingly, Knox Gilson came to see me while I was in rehab. He apologized for everything that had happened and for his deadbeat son. I accepted his apology as sincere. He was well aware that the emotional damage his son had done to me was accompanied by physical damage. We shook hands, and I raised my opinion of Mr. Gilson Sr. a notch or two higher. And that was the end of it. Sad story. I thought I had the perfect family. Hell, I was sure I had the perfect family. I can look back on the good times we had together, or with anger. Maybe someday I can do the former, because right now, I'm still dealing with the latter. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next videos.